Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. Today I'm joined by Yolanda. Yolanda is a mother of 2 little boys and a Bay Area native. Yolanda and I talk about what we wish we knew before we started using NFP, and we specifically touch on the big 4 different methods of natural family planning. A quick story about Yolanda before we jump in. I met Yolanda at a coffee shop where we were supposed to be meeting a group of other Catholic moms to chat. Yolanda and I were actually the only 2 that were able to attend that morning, and within about 5 minutes of meeting each other, we were already talking about natural family planning. We sat outside that coffee shop for at least an hour and a half, chatting all things natural family planning. I can't even imagine what the people walking by thought when we mentioned things like mucus, charting, and abstinence. And on that note, let's get started. All right. So what I wish I knew before I started using NFP.
Yes.
Woo, there's a lot there.
It's a big question. Yes.
There's a lot of things I wish I knew. What would you say is the biggest thing you wish you knew before using NFP?
I think hands down, I wish I would have known the options that were available to us. When we signed up, when we went to marriage prep, we did our marriage prep at parish OLP because our engagement was very short. So it was like, oh, we need to go do the marriage encounter weekend.
Yeah.
And we need to do NFP, and we only have like 5 months to squeeze everything in. So we looked for the first parish that had stuff available, and we said, let's just do that one. And, you walk in, a parish staffer handed us a book and said, yeah, just make sure you sign up for this class. And I was like, cool, NFP, awesome.
My assumption was NFP is one method sanctioned by the church, and it's the same thing, and you're always going to do it. It's the same method over and over and over.
Yeah. I mean, I felt exactly the same way. I had no idea that there were so many different methods and the different uses that they have.
Absolutely.
So, Symptothermal, I feel like is kind of that entry. It's very common. It's known as kind of the cheap one, I feel like.
Yeah.
And Symptothermal, so it requires you to take basal body temperature
every day.
Yeah, every day, same time, first thing. And then there's a mucus check and a sensation observation.
Observation/sensation.
Yes. And then optional cervix check.
Exactly. It's the optional cervix check, which I, like I said, I never did because I thought, no, I don't. I just don't think I could find it if I tried. And so I stuck to the 2 minimum that you need to get like a good chart, and something I was thinking about was when I would talk to people about like, oh, I'm learning the symptothermal method and it means I take my temperature at the same time every day. A lot of the responses I got were, oh, that's crazy. That's why I could never do an FP because I don't have that kind of discipline. And I wish I would have known back then that I could have said, well, there's actually other ways you can also practice NFP and not do this method. But I didn't know. I thought that you only had these were the things we had to do NFP.
Right. Yeah. I wish it was a part of regular marriage prep and regular NFP instruction is, hey, here's all of the different methods. Here's a little bit about them. And so you can take some time to discern which one of these is going to fit best in my life.
And I think the discernment piece that was completely that was removed. It wasn't even an option because I do think that when, that you need to discuss with your future spouse what you both want to do together.
Right. Well, because, in the Catholic Church, you don't even technically need to use NFP if you want to just go for it.
No.
Right.
But if you have a parish that's forcing you to do it in order to get married, they can't obviously force you in the sense that they're going to be in your bedroom making sure that that's what you're practicing. But I mean, some parishes won't give you the certificate of marriage or whatnot unless you produce the NFP class certification as well, right?
Right. And it's unfortunate that sometimes those parishes require you to take the method that they have an instructor for.
Exactly.
And Symptothermal is often that method. And while Symptothermal works for a lot of women, it doesn't work in many cases.
Yes.
Just and I couldn't even dive into really what those cases are because I know that Symptothermal works for me. So I don't exactly know what those are. But I know that I have friends that it's just like Symptothermal never worked for me.
PCOS, people who have cases like hypothyroid, hyperthyroid, other hormonal issues can affect your cycle.
Sure.
So that's case. And I don't want to say that Symptothermal doesn't work for those, but you kind of need a special almost doctor who understands that method.
Right. And you have to be really, really observant.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, even if you have a regular cycle and you skip a temperature, then
you could really throw yourself off. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, and I've definitely done that before. And it resulted in a lot more abstinence that wasn't necessary because we were trying to avoid at that time.
Exactly.
And
or you travel. I mean, right now nobody's traveling for the most part, but we went on our honeymoon and I wasn't taking my basal temperature every day.
Oh no, not when you're traveling. Like,
yeah, it was a 13-hour time difference. I couldn't even remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and like time differences make like a difference, and it's a pain when daylight savings time happens like right mid-cycle. Because you're like, do I need to wake up an hour earlier to keep taking my temperature at the exact same time so that I can know when peak is? Or
you know what it actually makes me think of? You know how sometimes you do these like work assessments where it's like, figure out your work personality or your leadership style, or like, what Disney princess are you? We almost need like an NFP quiz.
Yes.
That kind of helps you figure out which method is right for you. Like, do you like waking up at the same time? Are you a person of do you like rigor and discipline in your life? Then Symptothermal might be for you.
Symptothermal is a method for you.
Are you more go with the flow, see what's going on? Maybe you might be a Billings Creighton kind of person. So.
That would be fantastic. We have to make a quiz like that. That would be so amazing. Okay, so let's go through the method. So we touched on Symptothermal. I think we more than touched on Symptothermal. Marquette. So tell me a little bit about Marquette, because I know that you have been using Marquette lately.
Yes. So how I found out about Marquette is kind of unfortunate. And I was postpartum and I needed to space out my next pregnancy due to, after the C-section, they're like, you need at least minimum of 18 months from birth to birth. So I was okay, we're not going to get pregnant before 18 months. And we didn't. But part of the way I did it was I was online searching like postpartum NFP, and I kept seeing people talking about ovulation test strips. And so I came across sources of people who kind of came up with their own kind of family planning methods where they would be like, oh, I just use an ovulation test and that way I know when I'm ovulating. And so I remember going on the NFP Symptothermal group and being like, hey, can we use, they call them OPKs, but really they mean ovulation something test. I said, can I use one of those? And while I'm doing Symptothermal, and people were like, no, that's a whole different method. And so I don't know how, but I ended up landing on realizing that the Marquette method uses the ovulation test strips, but actually not really. You use the clear blue monitor, which we've probably all seen commercials for, which is like, now it's time to have your baby, and clear blue can help you get pregnant faster. And the Marquette method is basically the inverse of the clear blue monitor. So where the clear blue monitor says, hi, you're getting closer to ovulation. If you are using Marquette to like avoid pregnancy, you do the opposite. So if it tells you hi, you abstain. You abstain until the monitor gives you a peak happy face. And if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, then you know that you, so after that, it's very similar to Symptothermal, where after you ovulate and the monitor tells you, you wait 3 days And then like on the 4th day until your period, it's like good to go. So what I thought was really cool about the Marquette method is it's very objective. So I drove myself crazy postpartum trying to read mucus.
It's insane
because it's very different. And so I remember going on an NFP postpartum symptothermal group, and one teacher and saying like, I'm so confused by this postpartum, like one day I'm dry, one day I see this, one day it looks like that. And this woman who worked for a diocese out in like Arkansas reached out to me, and she sent me a private message on Facebook, and she's like, I'm happy to work with you over just like a phone call. And this is another thing that I wish I knew. You should just find an instructor that you like and work with that person, because you will go down a rabbit hole trying to talk to different people, and certain people tell you this. So you really need to find somebody that you're comfortable with and you trust, because she told me, yeah, you know what? I used to be a CCL teacher. I don't really like how they label the observations. So use my method instead. And so I ended up just being really, really confused. And that's why I landed on Marquette, because there's hardly any subjectivity unless you want to inject it. In Marquette, it's the sense you pee on a stick, you put that in the monitor, and the monitor tells you if you are getting close to ovulation and if you've ovulated. And that's it. That's pretty much all you need to know. And then you use your own discernment to decide based on your objective what you want to do, right? So that's Marquette. And then for people who are like, well, oh my gosh, what if the monitor misses peak, which is / ovulation?
Mm-hmm.
What are you supposed to do? And that's why people use the ovulation test strips as kind of insurance backup.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So Marquette is very much objective, and I don't necessarily have to interpret anything. Like the monitor, the science behind it is just going to tell me yes or no.
Yeah. And the monitor is very sensitive. So if it reads an estrogen rise, it'll go, you might be getting close to ovulation, even if your LH, which is the ovulation hormone, doesn't rise. So in postpartum, it's crazy, because you can have your estrogen rising all the time, but it doesn't. But you'll see right there on the monitor that it'll tell you estrogen rise detected, but no LH surge, LH being the ovulation hormone. So right now I'm trying to catch that first peak, for example. And so what I like about Marquette is I don't have the time right now to be taking my temperature every day.
Sure.
And that gives me, in the monitor, I do what I need to do in the morning. It tells me what I need to know, and then I move on with my day, and I'm not, checking. But I will say having the knowledge of symptothermal helps, because sometimes I'll be like, whoa, what is this? What is this I'm seeing that I haven't seen in a few months? And that gives me, so it's helpful. It's helpful to have that knowledge. But I remember sometimes I'll tell my Marquette instructor, I saw this kind of mucus, and she goes, right. But what we're really more focused on is what the monitor says, because the monitor is the one that's picking up on the actual amount of hormone in your urine.
Sure. Right. I want to go back to something you touched on, just about finding an instructor that you're comfortable with. And I think that is so valuable and so important. I know, like when I first started learning NFP, I learned from a book, and I'm going to say learned in like quotations.
Yes.
I didn't learn. I learned like so little about NFP, and I knew very little about how exactly it worked, that I didn't trust the science behind it. I didn't trust the rules, and we abstained way more than we needed to, because I wasn't confident. And so if I had an instructor, if I had actually learned from an instructor and been able to have a back and forth and ask questions and be able to say, hey, here's my chart, I don't understand what's going on, or I don't understand what you're saying by sticky mucus. Like, I don't get what that means. Please tell me. It took me months to figure out what sticky mucus looked like compared to egg white mucus. Like, I just didn't get that. And
I still don't get it. Even as you're saying that, I'm like, I don't know. And then, I've had an instructor tell me, if there's mucus, you're fertile, period.
Sure. Well, and
that's confusing.
It's very confusing. And that's where the expertise of an instructor just can help so much. So anyway, I just wanted to like touch on that because I thought that was very, very important.
And I want to sorry, Ellen, but something I want to emphasize about that as well is if you're working with somebody and you don't think it's a good fit, I would encourage whoever's, practicing the NFP method to like try another instructor, or even better, before you formally commit to anybody, talk to a few and see who maybe has the same train of thought as you. I remember postpartum, I signed up for an NFP postpartum NFP Symptothermal course, and the instructors, they hadn't been practicing NFP for a long time because they were much older. So the woman had gone through menopause, and they were kind of what it's called, like trying to whatever. So they ended up having like 7 kids. I remember thinking like, I can't really relate to them because I'm in a very different place in life right now. Definitely. And right now my Marquette instructor, she's a few years older than me, has 2 kids, and that's it. And so I know she's been practicing the method for 13 years, and I like what she's done with it.
Sure. Right. And that's kind of something that's cool that's come out of all of this quarantine is many instructors that weren't doing virtual before are doing Zoom or some kind of just phone consultations. And so it's actually easier now to find an instructor that you're comfortable with.
Yes. And so I would encourage people, like, before you commit, even to a method, like talk to different instructors and just say, can I get a 15-minute and get a sense and of cost, because many instructors do charge cost, commitment, what their approach is, if it's going to fit in with yours. Are you the kind of person who needs a kind of hand holding where you need to text your instructor every day? Are they going to be cool with that? Those are all things that you kind of want to get a sense for. For example, my instructor, she's fine with me texting her a picture of like one of my ovulation sticks, and I know she'll respond within, a reasonable amount of time in the day. Or do you have the kind of instructor who's like, just reach out to me if you have questions, and I may get back to you the same day, I may not. So, those are things that you have to think about when you're looking for an instructor.
Definitely. Well, and what's cool is a lot of instructors will offer a free consultation or a free intro session, or just at least give you, 10 or 15 minutes to just chat with them and ask those questions. And that's a really good point. That's extremely important that you are comfortable. I mean, it's just like having any healthcare professional, right? You want to be comfortable with your doctor, but
this even more because you're talking about intimate stuff, right?
This is very intimate stuff. And so
you might text them and be like, am I going to party tonight or what? What's going on?
Well, I remember, so my husband and I became instructors. We're still in the process of becoming instructors, but one of the things that they reiterated multiple times is, you are never giving people permission to have sex. You are saying, here's what the rule says. And you are in phase X. You are in
exactly.
You are in phase 3. Like, and I thought that was hilarious. But from a user perspective, that's what it feels like.
It does.
I'm texting my instructor because I need to figure out, like, have I moved into phase 3? Like, am I good to go?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And you want to have the kind of relationship with an instructor where you can kind of ask that. Again, knowing discernment is a huge part of NFP, which I guess, again, it's one of those things I wish I had known beforehand, that the method doesn't tell you when to be intimate or when to have children or when to not have children. That is your decision. The method, whichever you choose, is just giving you the data so you can make an informed decision.
Oh my gosh, that is so true and beautiful. Like, it is not the method that is telling you whether or not to have a child. Yes. It is you and your husband in prayer, in discernment, talking to God. Is it time that we should try to have a kid, or should we continue to abstain if you're in a period of, or I mean, not continue to abstain, continue to try to avoid. That's what I was
exactly. Yeah, continue to avoid, or even let's just see what happens, right? Let's just see what happens, and God's will be done. And
right, and I feel
that's
like
another part of it.
That comes up actually quite a bit with couples using NFP. It's like, okay, I'm not 100% sure what the rule is telling me right now,
Mm-hmm.
but let's see what happens. Maybe we are ready. Maybe we are ready to go there. And that's often the beginning of the switch from trying to avoid to trying to achieve.
Exactly.
I know that's kind of what happened with my husband and I before we had our daughter. It was like we had a cycle where we were kind of like, it doesn't really matter. And then the next month rolled around and we're like, well, why were we thinking that? Maybe it is time.
Exactly. And a lot of that is just inviting that in prayer, and because you can get really in your head regardless of method about like, is today a go day? It's like, listen, the method isn't going to tell you. That's for you to decide. The method's just going to give you the data.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. Okay, so let's go back. We're trying to list out all of the different types of natural family planning. And we might miss some because there are some lesser known
and emerging
methods.
Yes.
But we're talking big ones that have lots of research behind them. Completely science-based. Okay, so Symptothermal, Marquette. Now I feel like we get the two that are sort of categorized together: Billings ovulation method and Creighton model. So both of those are mucus only. And I believe Billings came first, and then the Creighton model was kind of modeled after Billings. And now I feel like the Creighton model has like jumped way ahead in the medical field. And the Creighton model is where NAPRO technology comes from. A lot of fertility. What would you say? Like fertility help, fertility?
Yeah, I think it falls into like the now secular emerging like fertility awareness, and people using it not just for around fertility, but around just like general health. When they're, now as part of women trying to understand their cycles, they're turning to this knowledge to read all that. But I do know, and Ellen, I'm not an expert in either one, but
neither am I. I've never used either one.
But I do know one has very simple observations, like the way you categorize them is very simple. I know the other one has like a really elaborate kind of system for capturing all kinds of observations. So, but I do know, I do know that that's like the distinction between them, and they're both mucus based. And I have a friend who she uses Creighton. And I remember she said, "Oh, I love it. I for me, it's the simplest thing. I check, I see what's going on, and then I decide what to do." So, as you can see, that they're different from like Marquette, where you're literally like dipping your sticks in urine or peeing on sticks. Then you have Symptothermal where you're taking your temperature, and then these ones you're literally just pulling your underwear down and seeing what's going on.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Those methods, the mucus only methods, can definitely be very simple once you really get it.
You really learn them.
I think the learning curve for those ones sometimes can be a lot steeper, particularly Creighton, because, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm not an expert in these two, but Creighton is the one that has a little bit more intense of different readings and different observations, and then Billings has a little bit more simplified observation recording method. And so just getting over that learning curve, but then once you're there, it's just like, it's one sign, that's what I'm doing, I got this.
And again, that's why the instructor is so important. I think regardless, you have to really trust your instructor, and then trust yourself once you know it enough to go with it. But to my understanding, those are like the big four.
Yeah,
that I'm aware of as like the NFP.
I have a couple more in my head, but I don't know anything about them. I mean, I'm just going to mention them. There's Boston Crosscheck, and Fem Health. Which is it Fem Health? Is that? And I believe that's actually a secular.
Yes, that's a secular approach to kind of like Symptothermal, I think. Okay. But what I do know about the Boston Crosscheck method is that's Symptothermal plus Marquette kind of rolled into one. That's like the simple way. That's the simple way to describe it. And I see people in, I'm in a Facebook Marquette group, and they're constantly talking about how they use their symptothermal method knowledge and their Marquette, and they just kind of put it all together. So Boston cross-check is pretty much taking every single observation you can, which is mucus, temperature, everything, the monitor, and just using it all together.
That's for the, like, I need to make sure I have a very grave reason to avoid pregnancy, and I need to make sure that this will absolutely not happen.
Exactly.
There are definitely those situations. Now, that's not to say that the other methods don't work. They absolutely work.
Yes.
I mean, I know, Yolanda, you did some research for me a while ago on and you just put out the different efficacy rates, and they are all over 97%.
Yes. So that's okay. That's something I wish I would have known before I started NFP, because I went into NFP kind of thinking that it was half like method, half faith. As in, like, you pray, you get what you want.
I'm not, God, I don't want a child right now. So can you just make that happen for me?
Yeah. So I that, I know it sounds silly, but I honestly thought that maybe there was like an element of that, but I think that's kind of more discernment. But anyway, going back to it, I had no idea NFP was so effective. And it's it's comparable with the pill, which is 98%. So I remember one time I was getting stressed out about, I remember telling my husband, like, I can see why. I said, I'm not saying I want to do this, but I can see why the pill is so easy. And then I remember, because you just take it and then it's not going to happen, or it is going to happen. And then I remember hearing again that most of these NFP methods, their efficacy with perfect use is 98%, or like, I think combined or something, it's like 98%, right?
Yeah.
And then the pill, perfect use, 98%. So it's kind of like, well, actually, you've got a great method that is perfectly healthy for you. It's not going to mess with your hormones, and if you follow the rules, which also, like, the pill also requires you to do the same thing every day, discipline, rigor, you will get the same kind of efficacy. And for me, it was beautiful to know that God gave us methods that could achieve what science does, and sometimes even better, because abstinence is 100%.
Right. Abstinence is 100% effective. It is the only method that is 100% effective for not getting pregnant. You know what? I actually, I just wanted to look up the CDC's website. So for typical use, the birth control pill has a failure rate of 7%.
Yeah.
But fertility awareness based methods, and they give a range here, is the typical use failure rate is 2 to 23%. Now, the 23% is not any of these methods that we have now mentioned. That is the method that is not a method. The 23% failure rate is rhythm.
We didn't even talk about it because
it's not a method.
It's not a method. But then when you tell people you're doing NFP, they automatically assume rhythm method. And it happens to me all the time when I go to the doctors.
Oh, yeah.
And another thing I wish I would have known, I wish I would have had my tagline ready for when I was challenged by nurses and doctors, because anytime, I've given birth twice, and right after I give birth, the next day, I'm in the bed recovering, and they're like, "What are you doing for birth control?" And when I say now, when I say Marquette, it's nicer because they obviously haven't heard of it in most cases, most medical professionals, so they're just confused. But when I used to say NFP, natural family planning, the look I would get would be like, "Oh, you mean the rhythm method? You're doing the rhythm method."
That's exactly what happened.
So uncomfortable.
Yeah, with my OB after the follow-up appointment, the 6-week follow-up appointment, and she's like, "Okay, let's talk birth control." And I was like, "Yeah, I use natural family planning." And she's like, "Oh, the rhythm method? Just so you know, we suggest that you don't get pregnant.
Yes,
like within 6 months." And I was like, Yeah, I know. Like, my method is science-based. I'm not
Yes.
looking at a calendar and going, oh, yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said science-based, because I think sometimes people like I had assumed that NFP was part like, oh, and then it's, you pray about it, and it's like, yes, you pray to decide what to do, but the all the methods are very much grounded in research and science, and like Clear Blue, the Clear Blue, Marquette method is using technology to give us the knowledge that our body gives us by design, which is like God's beautiful design, right? So all of these methods are drawing on the knowledge of the body for which God has designed for us, right? So it's, and like when you look at when you look at stuff that's not like contraceptive, they're also drawing on the knowledge of the body to do like the opposite of what we're doing.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a great place to end this conversation on. Mm-hmm. We could go on for hours, probably, about all of the things I wish I knew before using NFP. But I think we fantastically covered just kind of the big four different methods. And I think the big takeaway here, the method does not tell you whether or not to try to achieve pregnancy or avoid pregnancy. Mm-hmm. It is you and your spouse's conversation, discernment, prayer that helps you get to that decision.
Right. The method is a tool. So find one that you like, spend your time doing your research, and then know that that's all it is. It's just a tool. And it shouldn't rain on your on your marital bed and tell you what to do. That's between you and God. It takes 3 to get married. Reverend Fulton Sheen said that. NFP's just the data. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's just the data, and it'll give you something to think about. And I've really enjoyed that recognizing that often there's this kind of assumption that faith and science don't mix, and it's like actually NFP's the perfect combination of both.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Yolanda, for coming on the podcast. I hope that we'll just continue having great conversations like this again in the future. Thanks for listening to Charting Toward Intimacy. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any opportunities to expand the natural family planning conversation.